Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor coming to you from, as always, New Orleans, Louisiana. And joining me, as always, Rachi Messing, still in Tel Aviv. Rachi?
For this week.
For this week, yeah.
I'm home this week. Looking forward to doing some travel coming up, but we'll see.
Good,
So,
good. We are really pleased today to be joined by Maura Grossman, Dr. Maura Grossman. And then I won't go into all the letters after your name because there's a lot of them and you can talk about that. Maura is, I'm sure, known to most of you, but maybe some of you don't have a sense of her background, and that's what we'll talk about. Maura is currently, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, please, a research professor at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. Yep. As well as an eDiscovery lawyer, a consultant, a special master, an expert, all the things that have led you to be dubbed at one point in your career as the Queen of Search. And we'll get into now. We've segued into other areas, which we'll talk about as well. But Maura, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure seeing. I usually see you at a lot of conferences, as well as, I used to help you and Judge Fasciola and Craig Ball teach at the Georgetown University Academy every spring. And that's been 2 years now that we haven't done that, right? We've been on a hiatus. So really great to get a chance to talk to you again. Why don't you start off by telling us how you got into this crazy business of the law and technology, and that may be two divergent paths there. But if you could kind of give the folks who don't know you a little sense of how you got started and how you came to the place you're at now.
Sure. First, thanks for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. So I was a general litigator at Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz in New York, small unknown law firm. And when I got to about my 6th year, I was offered a promotion to counsel from an associate. And most of the counsel at Wachtell had if you will, a specialty area that they focused their practice on. And my mentor encouraged me to take this opportunity because a lot of my class members were still present, had not left the firm, and the competition to make partner was going to be absolutely fierce. And this was a sort of ramp off, but on the other hand, it was safety and security of a long-term position. So the trick was figuring out what it was that I was going to do that would sort of keep me happy and sustained and be useful to the firm. So my first thought was, I'd like to do ethics, legal ethics, and be ethics counsel for the firm, because the person who was doing it up to that point, Norman Redlick, who had been, I believe, the dean at NYU, was very close to retirement. And my mentor at the time said to me, no, you don't want to do that. Number one, you don't have enough white hair. And number two, you're always telling people no, that they can't do what they want to do. And that around here is going to be a very painful experience to constantly tell people, no, you can't do that. So he said, I've heard about this stuff. I don't know what it is.
Something or another, right?
Something or another. And there was one associate who had read Zubilay cases, and he was leaving the firm. So there was really nobody who knew much about eDiscovery. And of course, as you know, in 2006, when this was happening, the new rules were coming into place. Mm-hmm. So he said, I think this is a good fit for who you are and what interests you. And why don't you focus on this? And my immediate thought was, oh my God, doing document reviews for the rest of my life. No. No, he said, well, maybe it's more than that, but why don't you sort of poke around and see if this is something you're interested in. So I went out to the Sedona conference and I met Judge Shendlin and Judge Grimm and Judge Facciola and probably you, Tom, and many other people who were in just getting in at the very sort of ground, the ground level. And I actually found it very, very interesting. And so I went back to the firm and met with my mentor and said, yeah, I'll do this. And he said, well, what do you think you need to learn this and do this? And so I didn't know anything about computers. So I said, I probably need a teacher or a tutor to teach me about computers. And then I just need the time to read everything Sedona's written up to that point and all the case law, which of course you could do at that time. That would be pretty impossible to do now. And I did that. And maybe it took me 4 or 5 months. And then I was coming into 2007 and the firm got a matter in Switzerland that had to do with tax fraud. US people putting their money in Swiss banks. And he said, there's going to be a lot of eDiscovery here, and none of us really know much about that. Are you ready? And I said, bring it on, baby. You know?
Right.
So I flew over to Switzerland, to Zurich, and I realized, oh my God, this is going to be fairly challenging because they had not done eDiscovery there. There were no vendors to speak of. And what I had to do was, because the client was extremely sensitive to data privacy, nothing could go off-prem and nothing could be attached to the web. So I created a network of computers that were air-gapped. They weren't connected to the internet. I brought in instances of concordance, and I got a guy to come right on prem to do processing. I think he used law at the time. And we did this matter. And I was like, woohoo, if I can do this, I can do anything. So
how much data was there?
Huh?
How much data was there?
Oh, I don't remember, but it was a lot. It was a huge amount, and it was messy. And we were working with a client who didn't want to, was sensitive to giving it over. So that was challenging. I think I made 16 flights to Zurich. So I came back to the firm and I had a sense of, wow, this is really a big deal. And of course, everybody was like, go back to your office and email us a document. We're not worried about this. And, now I look back and it's like, wow, it just took off from there. And I was uniquely positioned in 2008 when the market took a dive, when the clients weren't coming. I was pretty safe because I had a niche that nobody else had and that was needed. So that's how I got into this, sort of fortuitous by a mentor who was very prescient.
And if I remember correctly, Wachtel was pretty involved in the bankruptcies of some of the banks, and there was a ton of data going back and forth then. So yeah, that uniquely positioned you to be ready for that. So
and World Trade Center, the firm handled also litigation from that. So we were swimming in data, which is in part how I got into TAR.
Right. So we'll get there in a minute, but before we get there, just some further background questions. Did you always know that you wanted to be a litigator, that you wanted to get into legal, or was that something that came later in life?
That actually came later in life. I started out as a clinical psychologist, so I have a PhD in clinical psych.
Really?
Yeah. So I started.
Which probably comes in
analyze
handy.
Your dreams. You got.
I was going to say that comes in handy working with lawyers, also, right?
Yeah, certainly. So I left. I went to Brown. I graduated from Brown. I went straight into a master's and PhD program and I practiced for a number of years. And I found, frankly, that I was better suited to the administrative tasks of running psychology clinics and things like that than sitting in the chair. So Tom would be there, say, kvetching about, how miserable his life was. And I was sitting there thinking, grow up,
Right. You just want to slap them and
right.
say,
So I figured maybe this isn't a good fit. Maybe I should, maybe I'm better telling people what to do than listening. And so I decided to go to law school.
Very cool.
Wow.
And so that brings up a number of things in terms of then, you using your psychology background in legal and in as a litigator first, and then separately once you started looking at, okay, how, and we'll get into the TAR and how people think and how computers think and all of those things, but from a pure litigation standpoint, I'm sure it was very helpful in terms of understanding and telling the story and helping to piece things together, that analytical way of thinking that comes with a psychology background.
I would say yes and no. I was initially interested in, jury consulting and things like that. But there's so few trials, so and very, very few at the firm I was at. So that wasn't going to happen. I think the disadvantage was one of the most prized characteristics of a psychologist is being in touch with your feelings and being sort of genuine at displaying them. And if you think about most lawyers, that is not a prized characteristic. So I struggled a little with that because when I was anxious, I would express anxiety and nobody wanted to hear it. They want to hear you're a warrior and you're walk
confident, right?
Yes. But it did help, I think, one, in having a good sense of where witnesses and where clients were at and what they might need emotionally, when they needed you to be tougher and when they needed you to be more understanding. And I think you're right, Rachi, that I was very interested in stories, which also, now that I think about it, is probably a reason why eDiscovery interested me. Putting the puzzle together and figuring out the story is very much something that psychologists do. You need to understand somebody's life and what brought them to the point at which they're at and why they have the pathology that they do. So I think I did like probably the white collar work that we did at the firm much more than I liked shifting, money from one place to the other place, or untangling, some of these security cases and things like that.
Right. Okay, so let's now jump ahead a little bit. So you've got the data piece under, you've got a pretty decent understanding now of what's going on with computers and networking and where data lives. And when did you start looking at it from, like, I imagine that there was some type of shift that took place where you went from just okay, there's these systems and I just need to get the data in order to push it forward, to really seeing that, hey, I can actually utilize the data, meaning not just try to push it through the process, but try to get better understanding and better, basically getting into analytics for what data represents, as opposed to just, we need to move it through discovery and produce it, which then obviously we'll go into TAR and AI and all the fun stuff that you're into now. But let's start with was there that moment, that aha moment, when you realized that, like, hey, maybe I can do more with this data?
It was in many ways more mundane than that. The problem we were facing, and this was right from this Swiss matter on, was the volumes. And Wachtell is a little bit unique in the sense that it's not leveraged like most firms. They're not 4 associates to every partner and a junior and a senior and all of that. It's close to 1-to-1. So we didn't have armies of people who were available to do document reviews, and many of our matters were very, very time sensitive, and the firm, at least at that point, didn't like to outsource. So you have this sort of triangle of things that are very challenging when you're dealing with the kinds of volumes we were dealing with. So again, my mentor said, you need to figure out how to solve this problem for us. And that was way back in 2007 going into 2008. Wow. So that's how I started to look at, are there technical solutions? So I wasn't as much focused on getting the story out as how do we get through this data and be able to make a production with the resources we have and the time constraints. Money at that point was not really the issue. If people came to Wachtell, they could, for the most part, not that they appreciated paying for discovery, but they could probably afford it.
They were willing. Right.
So I started looking at various alternatives, which is what got me involved in the Trek legal track that Jason Barron had gone to the National Institutes of Standards and Technology in Gaithersburg, Maryland. They're the people who measure things. So if you go there, you can see the official ruler and the official pound and the Kevlar vest that's the most bulletproof. And I got in really at the ground floor of that with Jason and others. And I was introduced to machine learning. And that's where in 2008, 2009, we were looking at these various machine learning tools to see, and they were pretty primitive at that point. Could they perform? We weren't even comparing them to humans. We were just trying to see if they could do this task, and better than keywords and things like that. And I came across this professor named Gordon Cormack, who had a spam filter and that he was using. And the light bulb went off for me: spam, ham, relevant, not relevant, privilege, not privilege. I wonder if these kinds of tools, it can be taught, if they can be taught to distinguish spam and ham, maybe they can be taught to distinguish relevant for not relevant. So that's when we took some of the Trek data. I had seen what he was able to do with the spam filter was phenomenal. And it was so much better and quicker than contract attorneys in any of that process. But the point was, when I started telling people about this, they thought, well, she's on crack,
Right.
She doesn't know what she's talking about. This is ridiculous. Nobody's got better lawyers. I mean, maybe this is a problem at Davis Polk and Paul Weiss, whatever, but not at Wachtell.
But not by us, right?
Our reviewers are perfect. And so we knew we were going to have to do a study and pit reviewers against the technology back to back to be able to convince anyone. So that led to the Richmond Jolt study, which we started a little after 2009. We got it published in 2011. And then, of course, Andy Peck in the Southern District of New York took judicial notice of our research and said TAR was permissible. And then it took off after that, because now there was science behind it and there was judicial imprimatur.
Right. And it wasn't just a bunch of technologists kind of saying, yeah, we can use this. Sure. We'll take this technology and figure out a way to make it work.
Right.
Which it very much was in the early days.
At what point did you convince the attorneys at Wachtell that was true? Or did you ever?
We did. I would say it was early 2010 we started to use TAR, and On the first couple of matters, it was in conjunction with human review. So they would do their standard human review. We would use TAR and we would say, guess what? You missed these 80 documents.
Right.
And people started to be convinced. Now, it was not at the upper levels where I can talk myself blue in the face, but to get people who don't understand technology to adopt it is a challenge. But we were working with junior associates who saw this process as so much better than sitting, at a computer for 16 hours reviewing documents. So I would say to them, if you like this and you find it helpful and you're convinced it works, talk about it as much as you can. Tell everybody on the planet this, because they're tired of listening to me. They think I've drunk the Kool-Aid.
Right.
But if they hear it from you, that as rare commodities at the firm, because there weren't a lot of associates, that this is a helpful tool, that you really want to use this, that you think it's doing a better job than you can more efficiently. That's how it was really a grassroots thing, and people came to trust it sometime in 2010, which, as you know, was really early.
Still early,
really early in the process.
Yeah.
I mean,
at what point did
in a lot of ways, today we're still
Go ahead.
early. I mean, I was just going to say, it's amazing with all the advances that machine learning has made in the last really 5-6 years overall. In legal, it's talked about and some people use it, but it's still early days. It's and I think for a lot of people to think about it in that way is important, to realize that there's still a lot of room to help guide and help figure out, how exactly is this technology going to play long term? I mean, obviously on a case-by-case basis, there's utilization happening, but there's still a lot of room for us to go, and there's still, the technology is so much more advanced than what we're making use of within the legal industry today. So it's a cool time to be involved in this, which,
and to tell you the truth, that was a real shock and disappointment to me. I thought I was deluded. I thought after we put out this study, of course it's a no-brainer. The science shows it's effective. Everybody's going to use it, and I'm sitting in my office waiting for my ticker tape parade and my balloon day and everything, and it doesn't come. And I think I didn't understand, in part because the firm I was at was very appreciative of the technology, but other firms where they had hundreds of document reviewers, and that this impacted the bottom line, both for the law firms and for vendors. And I never expected the pushback at all. It just hadn't occurred to me that people wouldn't automatically switch to something that had been shown to be better, and certainly even if it wasn't better, if it was just as good, if it was 50 times as efficient, it seemed to me it was a no-brainer. But you're right, it's been pushing a rock uphill for a decade now.
But, and not to get overtly political, certainly we've seen in the last couple of years, Americans surprisingly don't trust science, and don't trust technology in all sorts of fields, right?
Yes.
And so lawyers aren't really unique in that respect. At one point I thought they were.
I was going to say the same thing, but I figured, maybe we should get to politics here. But that's
we'll keep it away from politics. Yeah,
that's my role in the show.
Is to shake things up, right?
No, but it's just. I for a long time, I thought it was, attorneys don't know technology. They haven't been trained, blah, 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 blah. But we're seeing more of a widespread. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, do you have more acceptance from European attorneys, from people outside of the United States, or is it still just a general reluctance to trust the technology?
I'll tell you, in Canada, where I am now, it's just used. It hasn't led to the same kind of wars. Here, contract attorneys are even more expensive than they are in the United States. But it hasn't led to the same kind. I also think in other areas, we've done a lot of work in the last year or two using TAR for systematic review, which is to find research studies related to out of huge medical databases. So we did some work on COVID-19.
Right.
And we may do some work for the World Health Organization on Ebola. And the doctors, for the most part, and medical researchers have been very receptive because the incentives are very different. This saves them a lot of time and effort and cost. Typical systematic review can take a year, and we can do it in 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
And for them, I mean, they're not billing. That's the bottom line.
It's a different paradigm, yeah. But if anything, the last couple of years have kind of convinced me it's not just lawyers, it's us as a society. We have a real hesitancy towards trusting technology. It's like it's Hal. Open the pod bay door, Hal. And so, hey, Maura, if you can talk about it, I'm just curious. At some point there, you developed, what did you call it? The secret sauce?
We called it the sauce, yes.
The sauce, yeah. So you built your own tool. If you can talk about that, I don't want to impinge on any, confidentialities at all, but when did that occur in the timeline? When did you say, I can do this?
So that was when we took Gordon's original spam filter, which was really phenomenal. As a matter of fact, I think later on Yahoo adopted it through a series of acquisitions and stuff. But we tweaked it at that point. I tweaked it so that it could work in eDiscovery, and truthfully, that's when we developed continuous active learning. So we weren't using what people now call TAR 1.0. From day one, we were using continuous active learning with the constant feedback loops. So but that didn't come into the field until later, because people were using support vector machines and had this whole thing with the control set and the random sample and all of that. So we were never doing any of that. From the very beginning, we would train on known documents and that the more iterative process. And we did research in 2013 that showed that was a better approach than TAR 1.0. And more recently, I think lots more people have adopted it. But that we got into it early using our own tool.
Right.
What are your thoughts? Well, let's actually, before we get there, let's just finish a little bit of the history. So you left the firm back in, when was it?
2016.
16. Okay. And you're now, did you start teaching right then, or did you take a little break?
No, I moved up to Canada in 2016. Most people think it was solely to be with Gordon Cormack, who at that point was my fiance. But it was actually slightly different. At that point, doing matters with 100,000 documents, I could sort of do them in my sleep, upside down, blindfolded with my arms tied behind my back. And I wanted to do more complicated tasks than plain vanilla eDiscovery in the routine matter. And the firm was a corporate firm, mostly M&A, and that wasn't a great fit for them. They didn't want to be an eDiscovery firm like Redgrave or something like that. So I couldn't really bring in business, because when somebody wanted the firm to do only the eDiscovery piece, that was not going to go over well at the firm I was at. And also at that point, Judge Peck had asked me to be the special master in Rio Tinto. I had already been a special master for or a neutral for Judge Shendlin in the Endilon case. And that was not really something that, and expert work is creates all kinds of conflicts for law firms. And I wanted to do more of that work because it was challenging. So I wanted to do much harder eDiscovery problems and much more special master work. And that just was not a good fit. So that's why I left. And I wanted a landing spot. I wanted an email. I wanted a desk.
Right.
And so I asked Waterloo if they didn't know what they were going to do with me. I mean, this is a hardcore computer science department. This is the MIT of Canada. And they're like, what are we going to do with a lawyer? But hey, you're not asking for anything other than a desk and an email and some computer resources and things like that. No problem. And then I sort of poked around and said, what do I want to do? So my first semester there, I co-taught an information retrieval seminar with Gordon Cormack on legal information retrieval. And we had students that were interested in that. And then I took off in my own direction. Of course, I still do that work, but I became very interested in artificial intelligence, some of the ethical, legal, and policy around that. I saw that these students were brilliant in building and developing and optimizing algorithms, but they never really thought about, does this stuff have bias? Who is it going to impact? Does it create inequities? And so I started teaching cross-disciplinary courses, including with students at Osgoode Hall Law School. So I taught, as far as I'm aware, the first course that brought CS and law students together. I linked the two rooms by video. I went every other week. I was at this school or that school. And since then, that's what I've been doing, either cross-disciplinary. This winter, I'm going to teach a course, co-teach a course, the first course here on entirely on discrimination in computing.
Wow. So that's cool. So now you're pretty much focused on the AI and no, I assume you're not doing any actual casework or I mean, you're consulting still, or?
I consult. I still do TAR work, less frequently, but I still do it. I have done some expert work and lots of special master work.
Special master.
I'm sorry. Let me interject just a second, though, Rachi. There's something else that you did up there at Waterloo that I want to make sure we mention, which is you were named the director of Women in Computer Science.
I did that for 18 months.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues went on a sabbatical and had something else to do for 6 months. So there was an 18-month slot, and they asked me if I would do it. And it was funny because that mostly was not an issue I thought about all that much. Although we all know there are gender issues in law, we could talk about those too, but they're really serious in computer science. Out in Silicon Valley, maybe there's 17% women. At Waterloo, it was in the 20s in computer science. And so I spent 18 months doing that, did a lot of fundraising to get money for scholarships for a women's lounge. And I did a lot of advocating for women, lots of programs, both outreach to increase the pipeline. So with high school and junior high school students, as well as providing better support systems at the School for Women. Since then, my colleague, Jo Atlee, has come back. So she took back over women, and I'm the chair of the EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion committee for the school. So I've moved into some of those issues, which were sort of a natural transition, I think.
Right. You made an interesting point. I saw a fascinating interview with, I always get her name wrong. Is it Melissa Gates or Melinda Gates?
Melinda, I
Melinda.
think.
Melinda, yeah. I saw an interview with her on TV last year in which she addressed that issue and said she thought a source of the problem, not necessarily the source, but one of the big problems was that young girls aren't pushed towards math and the sciences in secondary school, in high school, even the 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Therefore, it's not unusual that they're not there in
Why would they want?
college
Right.
because they've already been steered in other directions. I mean, are we getting any better at that, do you think, from what you've seen with your work?
A little bit. The problem, frankly, is for visible minorities is even worse. They're completely tracked out at early ages. I think there has been some outreach activity, but often the way that computer science is represented, the picture, when we think of computer science, we think of some, big guy sitting on his sitting at his laptop playing video games or hacking away. That's not a particularly attractive picture for women. They often want to do things that are socially good or that have meaning.
Yeah.
And so we haven't really changed that image, and we haven't made it all that attractive. And that's part of what we're trying to do here is we offer boot camps and workshops and programs where we have people come and we teach them how to build a socially useful app, or we teach them how to market something that they might develop and the business around it, and that does seem to help.
How does the intersection of legal and computer science, because I would think that if it's hard enough to sell computer science to the female population coming up through the ranks, and if it's hard enough to sell legal, when you try to combine the two, that would become almost impossible to get people in the pipeline and actually wanting to focus on it. Or alternatively, and I apologize for the noise in the background, but alternatively,
Rocky's fan club.
Yeah, exactly. They're outside my door, wondering why my door is closed. Is it something that is not even as much of an issue? Meaning, if someone's involved in legal now, by default, they have to be computer savvy, or they are computer savvy in general. I mean, I was looking that someone was making the point that the millennials today, that the maximum age of a millennial is 37. So that means that you've already got people who are considered to be millennials, who in general are considered to be computer savvy, are already, some of them have been partners for a couple of years. They're not just coming up through the law firms. They're already, they might have been partner for 4 or 5 years. Does that make it easier for women to actually look at this from okay, how can I make an impact on that intersection of legal and computer science, or legal and technology, or is it irrelevant and we still need to make the efforts to specifically guide them through that?
Well, I'm not sure the partners are women.
That's
that's an issue.
100% valid point. Yep.
But
Yeah.
if you look at Women in eDiscovery and other organizations like that, there's certainly many paralegals and legal support people. We've got a fairly good proportion of women. I don't know if they're in the leadership positions. There's some. I think we've got some that I can think of. But the distribution in this particular area, I think, has actually been pretty good.
Okay, good.
So today, if you look at TAR and AI and kind of where the legal industry is using these different technologies, obviously we talked about how they're still behind the rest of the world or the rest of industry in terms of their use. But Where do you see the next, let's call it 5 years? How are things going to be shifting? How are things going to be changing in terms of that use of machine learning and AI within the legal industry?
I think we've seen with the due diligence and the contract review tools, a real uptake there. Again, I think the incentives are very different, where the incentive is to get the deal done as soon as possible. And maybe people are a little less persnickety with second requests and things like that. You just can't afford to review 20 million documents in 2 weeks.
Right.
So we've had good uptake there, I think. I'm hopeful about access to justice, other kinds of tools that will help the 80% of the people who can't afford legal services to figure out if they've got a claim, and help, filling out the forms like do not pay for the traffic tickets and things like that. We've seen some success on online adjudication systems. So I think definitely there'll be movement there. I think lots of firms have moved into having data analysis and innovation, I think is the word they're using now, chief innovation officers, trying hard to sort of distinguish themselves by finding other places where they can leverage these kinds of technologies. But it's still pretty slow. And but I think we're going to see more uptake, and you see even in the last 6 months to a year, money pouring in from venture capital investments. We've seen lots of companies snapping up other tools. So Relativity, getting a Text IQ, things like that. We've seen lots of that, and I think there'll be more and more of that.
So as it gets built more into the standard workflow, it'll just become the norm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Well, Tom, I think we've reached that point where we're going to have to start wrapping it up.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, Maura, we could talk about this. I'd like to go down that last thread for another hour.
Sure.
With your permission, we may come back to you after the first of the year and try to explore that some more. I'd love to get into your thoughts on that. Yeah. But all right, then I'll segue into our last two questions. The penultimate question is an easy one, a very short one, and that is.
There's a lot of money. Hold on, there's a lot of money riding on this one. So.
Rocky mocks me for this one. The question is: Beatles or Stones?
Oh, Beatles.
Okay, I lost again.
Victorious.
But that's a hard decision. That's a hard decision.
It is. But you are in the vast majority. I think of all the people
really?
we've. Oh yes, I think of all the people we've interviewed, literally only one has said Stones.
Right.
Everyone,
not counting Tom, of course. So
yeah,
Yep.
no.
And I think we both go either way, but I definitely lean a little bit more towards the Beatles. Tom definitely leans more towards the Stones. So
yeah. So
Sorry,
the last,
Tom.
it's the story of my life. So the last question is: if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, doesn't have to be anybody currently, anybody from any time in our profession, living or dead, doing anything you want with them for a day, doesn't have to be work related. Who would you spend that time with, and what would you do?
Oh, it would be Craig Schaefer. I miss him.
Yes.
I really do.
Yes.
He was such a good friend and mentor to me. He was so many things that I'm not. He had such grace, and nothing ever rattled him. I get rattled. So I would always want to learn from him. I'd love just to hang out, the opportunity to hang out. I'd love to talk to him about what I've been doing as a special master. He always encouraged me to do that, and gave me one of the best pieces of advice, I think, that I ever got in relation to that. And he said, your job isn't to be out there writing opinions and all of that stuff. Your job is to make the problem go away
There
and
you
write
go.
the least number of opinions you can possibly write. So I've been doing this over 10 years now, and I'm only writing my second opinion now
Great.
because I have to. So I would just, I'd love to hang out with him and talk, and I do miss him. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed, I only had a few times to meet him. Usually it was at Mike Arkfeld's conference.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where I met him as well.
And-
He was
and-
so classy. He was
Yes.
so classy.
Yeah.
And
Real
but
gentleman.
also on one of those occasions, I had the opportunity to speak on a panel with him, and he was a great co-speaker because he was that sort of a gentleman and engaged in discussion and shared his time on the podium and the microphone.
Yeah, I sat next to him at a dinner, and I was very junior at the time. And here I am, this punk coming in. I know all this technology and but he was awesome. I mean, he just took the time. He sat. We talked for probably 3 hours, and it was awesome.
So generous with his
Yes.
time always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need more people like that in our profession.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, Maura, we have indeed come to the end of our time. I really want to thank you. This has been a great talking to you as always. I love your perception and your take on not just where we've been, but where we're going. And I do look forward to the opportunity to speak more about that with you. Any shows coming up you're going to be attending or planning on? I'm kind of looking at Legal Tech New York, but I'm very cautious. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've been invited. I'm on the fence, but
Yeah.
probably nothing before the new year. And I'll revisit what I'm going to do after that.
Right. Okay. Well, we look forward to not just speaking with you, but hearing you speak at some of those conferences, because I really value your observations. And thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Rachi, as always, thanks for your time. And say hi to the fan club for me. And we will see all of you folks next time on the eDiscovery channel. Thank you.